Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to yet another edition of the Lambom Show. We're continuing our weekly conversations on African immigrant men, relationships, mental health, and all that good stuff. Over the last couple of weeks, we have been diagnosing what is wrong with our relationships. What are some of the issues that have been popping up? We have gone through many of these things, described them, talked about how we got here and all that. I mean, you can go back to this page, go back on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to watch most of these. Today, we want to take the conversation one step further. You realize that with every conversation we have had, we have also proposed ways of remedying the issues. We really want to focus today on how to do that. How do we heal these relationships? And our focus is really on how we, okay? This show has been built up for men, isn't it? Even though we have only women showing up most of the time. But it is meant to help us, become better persons, relate better, be able to take care of the hills and mountains that have grown that we have pulled up in our relationships. So we want to start the journey of healing. How can we heal our relationships? Was a starting point. Can there ever be a starting point even? And as always, to get us through this conversation, Vicky, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Lambert. How are you?
Good, good. I forgot to mention that I was on a program on Saturday where you were one of the speakers, and that was on the autism. And that's one of the, I mean, I don't know how I sat down for 4 hours going through that whole show, but it was quite interesting. And I'm happy with the perspective. Again, you, as always, you brought in, we show up with our energy, isn't it? It's about the energy levels and all that. So over the last couple of weeks, we have been talking about the issues that are affecting us, especially the men. And today we want to move forward to say, okay, while we continue the conversation as to what the problems are, let us also start talking about how to solve them. I don't know, solve may not be the right word, but what I talked about is healing our broken relationships, how to start healing, how to begin that process, because again, the one thing that you have emphasized a lot here is that men have an ego, and that ego, it depends on where we are in life, isn't it? Could be a crushed ego, could be some oversized ego, or all that. And we are not seeing how the ego is playing out in the relationship. And even worse, when problems come, the ego prevents us from being able to take time to study the situation and be able to move along and say, okay, how can I? The problem is, again, if the quote that I had today is something else, how can I begin to heal this relationship? It doesn't matter who broke it, isn't it? That's not important. But how can I begin to heal? So take it out.
I don't know where to start. I don't know how to thank you for bringing this up, especially vis-a-vis the conversations that we started over the autism um, session we had over the weekend. I'm so glad you brought this up because there was a lot that was touched on this particular day, and I didn't quite get the impression that we put everything in a perspective. So it's great that it is almost like it's almost a follow through from where we left off back then when it's interesting because like we started off by saying that nothing really has meaning until we give it meaning, right? I need
Absolutely.
you to, I need you to work with me here, Lambert. Cool. Yeah, so nothing really has meaning until we give it meaning, and we realize that when we come into any situation, we have to give it definition. So when we talk about healing, what exactly are we healing? Notice that the person that we engage, interact with, on a conversational level, the person we're relating with is pretty much like a curveball that the world throws at us. And these people typically bring out our own weaknesses. They bring out the things within us that we struggle with. We can't figure out these things by ourselves. It's only when we start relating that we realize that the relationship may not be going in the direction we want it to go. And so we get stuck or we feel stuck. But the question really is, are we healing the relationship or are we healing the self? This is where we never really stop to ponder. Am I using this person to deal with something that I'm struggling with? Or is it the relationship that I am healing? Because you can't really relate with someone else if you're not relating with yourself properly. So when you engage someone, it will bring out certain things within you. It will trigger certain things within you: pain, hurt, fear, vulnerabilities, which we have to deal with. Do we recognize these triggers for what they are? Do we understand that sometimes we're dealing with our past, using the person in front of us as a filter and as a handle, as in the person who triggers that thing that we now have to deal with? Do we understand that? And I think this is something that is always very elusive. So when you come into a relationship, you would realize that within the context of healing, if you look at healing critically, what does it mean? I want us to really focus on the word. What does healing mean? We only heal when we are in pain. We only heal when something is not working. So we would only heal if we've defined something as a problem. And when we characterize something as a problem, what exactly is going through our mind? Now, every situation is a problem if we don't really want to deal with it. It's a challenge if we're happy, we don't have to, but we would not mind engaging if we had to. And it becomes an opportunity when we are bent on getting something out of it. So you notice that the less the focus is on us, the easier it is to deal with a problem, or to deal with a challenge, or to deal with that opportunity. How hard it is a direct function of how much of our own ego we are going to overcome in order to deal with whatever it is that presented. Do you want to chime in at this point, or would you like me to continue?
So the let's take it one step backwards and get it to where we started off before, making that difference between happiness and fulfillment. Because within
Mm-hmm.
that, the conversation of healing takes on a different meaning. Because now it's not just about something that is broken, something that is even in ones that are just normal, you still have to do some work in order to get to that level. So within the context of fulfillment, the problems that we are having in our relationship, when you show up again, and I like what you said about the other person brings out something in you. Okay, there's something that the other person evokes. And are you really relating? Because I also believe very much that the problems we have are because we are not sitting down to examine the thing to find out whether we are in fact we are even in a relationship. We are presuming that we are in a relationship when there's something else going on. Okay. And because if you were in a real relationship, whatever that means, you would be able to see that there's something going on and what is my role in helping both of us get to that point of fulfillment where you are fulfilled and I'm fulfilled. It's no longer just about happiness. I don't know whether that makes sense.
Yes, so of course it makes sense. Fulfillment comes from giving, happiness comes from receiving. And so when these two are at loggerhead, as in you're not sure whether you're coming into that space to give, to contribute, to bring healing, or you're coming to receive because you feel like you've been giving way too much. You feel like you've been cheated, or you feel like there is something you need from this relationship that you're not getting, but at the same time you're not articulating because you believe the other person should know and understand that these are your needs. See, and that this is where communication again becomes very key. Because if you're not communicating, then you would assume certain things that the other person may really and truly be or completely oblivious of. And how would this typically happen? So if you're dealing with someone who has responded to your needs countless numbers of times, someone who has been there, they knew what T to cut and what I to dot, and they did it to the letter. In fact, they anticipated your need and met you at your point of need even before you asked. So you go downstream in the relationship, and this person is dealing with challenges which are unbeknown to you, obviously, because they're just struggling to go about their business. They don't want to burden you, so they don't talk about everything that bothers them. And so they show up and they're not present. And you're dealing with a scenario that both of you have had before, and he aced that scenario, or she aced that scenario since, or if we're going to look at it from both perspectives. Or no, let's come back to the man, because our focus really is the man. So you've got this amazing woman, and she's looking at this man, and she knows that he knows what to do in this situation because he's done it before. The difference being at this particular point in time, he's not really present. It's just a shell. His mind is someplace else. And so he's not doing what he needs to be doing. He doesn't show up. He's not present. Sorry. So what does the woman assume? That something is wrong. She may start assuming that she's not good enough. She may start thinking there's someone else out there distracting him. The first port of call will not be, oh, maybe he is worried. Maybe he's bothered. Maybe something is troubling him. First port of call is, okay, good. Why am I not enough anymore? And that already becomes a source of problems. It becomes a problem or a source of a problem. And it brews until that vibe is articulated, and it will not necessarily be articulated in a way that you and I can understand. It will be a cry for attention, no doubt, but it may come off the wrong way. You are never home, you never do this, or you used to do this, and there's a very good chance that may not come off too well. And so again, healing in a relationship, it's for the man to be in a position. It's for us to realize that if we pick up a vibe which doesn't seem to reflect the status quo, if it doesn't seem to reflect the positive energy we knew, have favored in the past and are used to, it's for us to realize that something is not right. Maybe take a break, take a step back, and start asking the right question. It obviously becomes a problem. And in that state and frame of mind, the first thing we do is assume that we too are being disrespected. So you've got someone in front of you who wants to be acknowledged, who wants to be loved, who wants to be cherished. And so they are asking because they know this is something you can do that you're not doing. So they feel not good enough and they go on the offensive, obviously, because they feel vulnerable. And so when they act or react, we get the impression that they're being disrespectful.
Go ahead, BK.
Are you with me so far?
Yes, I am. I'm with you.
So you see, we've come back to that whole concept of respect again. And if I do not feel respected, then I shut down. I can neither give love nor receive love. How do I love someone who does not respect me? How does someone who doesn't think I'm up to anything accept my love? So I start feeling insecure off the back of that perception of disrespect. My need for safety, security, and comfort becomes shaky. It is attacked. So I don't feel that first need, which is certainty, that certainty that I will have my respect, that is respect, or certainty through the filter of respect, is not there anymore. I've lost respect. I've lost my need for certainty. Obviously, it gives me a change of feeling, which is variety, but it doesn't exactly take me to an emotion that I would want to entertain. So we're already three needs down. Obviously, in that place, I don't feel very resourceful. So you don't feel like giving. So growth, not particularly interested in growing at that particular point at that point in time, unless of course you switch on your bigger self and start having the conversations that you really should be having. Conversations that are based on growth, conversations that are based on building as opposed to tearing down. Or conversations that are built on contributing, getting to the bottom of what is wrong with an understanding of where it is you're going as a couple. Now, if one or both of you do not take the time to do that, then obviously we start going down a perilous path.
Yeah, so BK, again,
Yeah,
let's zone in on the respect because I think that
yeah,
that is where the ego for the man becomes a real issue. Because when a man feels disrespected, I think that breaks down everything for him. He thinks that what he has, call it his manhood, is all that he has. He has been deprived of it in a certain sense. So
pretty much.
that disrespect, or call it respect, what does it really entail? When you say you feel disrespected, then the needs are now at three different levels. Break it down for us. What is it in a relationship? What does respect really mean? We talked about it some sessions back in terms of it's not about you backing orders and the woman is obeying everything that you say, isn't it? That's not it. And it's not about, there are people who, in communication, there's something called passive aggressive, isn't it? The person
Mhm.
says nothing, but in that nothing, they are very aggressive, you know. So again, let's come back to the theme or this thing of respect, because I believe that in trying in an attempt to get to that place of fulfillment, we all need to respect each other. And I feel that that respect is an area where we have not cultivated enough. We have become too authoritarian, and we we take that to be a lack of respect, forgetting to know that we ourselves, we want to give it a biblical connotation to it and say that the Bible says a woman should do what to the man. But again, let's talk about the respect.
Okay. So respect is a word, and like most words, it's a placeholder. So again, we go back to the initial point of definition. Nothing means anything until we give it meaning. But half the time when we talk about respect, it begs the question, do we really know what it is we are referring to? Or is it just a hideout? Is it just a place we run to and hide when we want to exercise and exert control? See, because if you had a lineup of about 10 men and you asked those 10 men what respect meant or beheld to each of them, you'd probably get 15 different definitions. We've been through this before. So that is where it starts. We're talking about, or we're using or coining a word that means different things to different people and engaging that word or using it as if its context were universal. And that's where it starts. So the man goes, well, you don't respect me. You never ever respect me. And she goes, what do you mean I don't respect you? I do this, I do this. The other day you asked me to do this and I did it. No, that's not what respect means, at least not to the man. When we feel threatened, we hide behind the respect to make demands that are not necessarily conducive. When we don't feel like we are in control, and this is what vulnerability again is really all about. We live in a society where the man, hypothetically speaking, is the breadwinner. The man is the one who's supposed to provide protection. So you're the one who's meant to have all the answers. Now, in the workspace, you have a contract, you know what you're supposed to do, it's all easy and done. But then at home, when you're dealing with a human being, there are no tips, there are no tricks, there are no strategies because they don't work. None of those work for the simple reason that they may work sometimes and they don't work at other times. So a person is not an automaton, a person is a dynamic continuum of energy that is fluid. It just flows. And it's a spectrum of different emotions that come together to define that person at any particular point in time. And that definition will change subject to the environment that person finds themselves in, what they are going through, how and what meaning they give to the experiences that they are having is what will determine the way they present themselves. So if you look at it, it's a very complex dynamic. You can just reduce it to one or two parameters or variables and make definitions, let alone be conclusive on those definitions. So these are words we should really shy away from or move away from completely, blot from the dictionary and get to the nitty gritty. So when we say respect, what exactly are we talking about? What needs to happen for you to feel respected? These are some of the questions we may have to take a break and ask if we're going to use the word respect. And if we're not hiding, if we're not just taking cover behind the word to exert control and authority, which gives us a certain sense of validation, which we may be missing. You see, because if I'm feeling empty on the inside, I've had a hard day at work. I come home, I'm looking for validation. Then I really don't want to be asked too many questions. I don't want to be second guessed. And I do certainly do not want to be challenged. And that's usually a good time to hide behind what I call a lack of respect. And what makes it very easy for us to adopt that position. You see, at work, we can easily lose our jobs if we're not doing what it is we're supposed to do or we're called upon to do. If something goes wrong, we get penalized. But then home is the place where we are likely to start taking things for granted. What is the worst that could happen? We are married. This deal is for life. And so it's very easy to take the person you are engaging with for granted, to impose what it is you want on them and not think about their needs. See, because at the time we're doing it, looking for validation, we do not necessarily take the other, well, we do not ever take the other person's needs into consideration. It is not something we're doing deliberately. So we're not deliberately despising the woman per se. We're just focused on what it is we need. But in our focus and lack of sensitivity, obviously, she will feel despised. She will feel not cherished because you're talking about someone who has had an equally hard, maybe harder day than you have had. But again, when we look at threshold tolerance for stress, duress, distress, and pain or frustration, you realize again that the women beat the men by and large. They may easily get into a frenzy, but when it comes to the ability, their threshold for pain, they have a very high threshold for pain. That's not something that is subject to debate. All we have to do is look at gestation and birth. I don't know how many men would survive that whole process of birth, so to speak. And then obviously, when you look at the fact as well that women are wired slightly differently, which means when they are under stress and duress, they want to talk about it. They want to deal with those emotions. They process those emotions. They resolve that energy from within them. And so that toxin and that poison is pretty much, it dissipates. And so they can easily bounce back and get on with things once they have had their say, once they have vented about something. That's it pretty much. Men don't necessarily work that way because men don't tend to vent. Men tend to internalize things, which means you've got all this trapped energy within you, unresolved, and it eventually becomes the free radicals that cause or eventually show up as disease. And this obviously has got further ramifications because a bad mood means you go to bed and you're not relaxed. If you're not relaxed, you don't get rested, and if you're not rested, obviously it means you don't sleep well. And sleep is one of those things. I mean, that's it's one of the most important things, important activities on the planet. It's not for nothing that we all sleep over a certain period. It's not for nothing that you go to bed at night, for instance, with an idea in your head, but no answers, just a question. You wake up in the morning and the answer to that question flashes. So there's a whole lot that happens and transpires when you sleep. You really connect with the self, and there's a lot of healing that takes place. Now, if that process is jeopardized, it means you wake up the following morning in an even worse state and frame of mind than you were the previous day, and that cycle continues. So you have this backlog of problems you don't even realize you're carrying. And then you move downstream. And then the next thing that you meet, everything becomes a trigger. And the question then is that problem that you're dealing with at any one point in time, is that the real problem you were dealing with? Or is that just another sign and or symptom of deeper underlying issues that are unresolved within you? So you notice it's a very complex ball game. It's a very complex dynamic. It is never what it appears to be because it has got children and grandchildren. It has got bits and pieces that do not immediately show up at the point of conversation. So the
And
things that you may spend, sorry, go ahead.
no, again, I just wanted to say that it comes back to the fundamental point you made a couple of weeks ago about being able to decode the language of the woman, isn't it? Because most of us want to take them at there's
Face
something
value.
going on. Yes. And you are not, she's saying this, but that's not what she's actually saying. There's something behind that. I mean, you referenced it earlier on in the show. I think it's a constant reminder that relationships are quite complex and you don't want to focus only on here and now. There's so much going on underneath that you need to peel. And again, that process of peeling depends what you are peeling off. If you're peeling an onion, for sure you end up with tears in your eyes, isn't it? If you are peeling off an avocado, then you have a great sandwich to get away with. But again, I just think that let's tackle something that happened, isn't it? We talked about it here. The concept of people going, so a man leaves Europe, America, goes and gets married to a woman in Cameroon or wherever and brings her and then begins to think now that he has become everything for the woman. And the woman now gets a job. See, she too comes, you do everything for her to go to school, gets a job, even starts making more money. Then the problems start. And it's always about what? Disrespect. Oh, the woman has started disrespecting me because this is somebody that I went and brought from Cameroon or brought from Nigeria or from Ghana or wherever. I can't believe that she can talk to me like that and all that. You know, that it's a problem within our community because we have refused to accept certain things. We have refused to define properly what respect means. Does it mean that when you assist somebody and bring them here, they can no longer challenge you in thought, in word, or whatever? Again, for me, that's the ego thing, isn't it? What is it? What do we mean by this disrespect when we are looking at some categories? Because the one thing that I've learned hosting this show with you is you show up, and the way you show up matters because it's going to determine the outcome. Okay, if you show up
Absolutely.
as this better than I when I'm brought. So again, you brought the person to stagnate, just become a slave, or what? You didn't anticipate growth. That's something that how to manage that. So I'm throwing in a lot of things here, but that's just to say that to your point about disrespect, deep down, if you look at the situation, is it disrespect or there's something more to it that you are ascribing and you are not taking a look? We men have to go and look at ourselves in the mirror and ask, how can I, how can I fix this? I'm not worried about the other person. You will make excuses about the other person. They were wrong and all that. Yes, but how can I? And you need to get to a point. It needs to be a point of humility to be able to come back to that and say, okay, in spite of all these things, the journey has to begin with me. Okay, with me working on myself and letting the other person, I mean, even if they're not seeing, but again, that healing needs to be where I am able to say, okay, I get it, but let's start from somewhere. Check it out.
Absolutely. So you've made one principal point. The first point you made was that of introspection, which is something we don't do a whole lot because introspection means you turn the light and the focus on yourself, but not for selfish reasons. Introspection means you look at how what you do affects your environment. Am I bringing a positive, progressive vibe? Am I contributing some? Am I contributing something positive, or am I contributing something negative? Am I leaving that space richer than I met it, than I found it? Or am I introducing entropy and turbulence to a situation that was maybe neutral? That is what introspection is all about. How did I leave that space? Now let's look at language, because language is a very important implement in this whole debacle, this whole discussion. When someone already starts by saying, I went and took her from A, B, C, or D, and she was nothing. Already, that tells you something about the insecurities that dwell in that person, because that is condescension. It means you needed someone you could lord over. You are not looking for a partner, because what is a partnership? A partner is an equal. Yes, you may take leadership in certain areas, but by and large, you are partners, which means you are equal. So let's come back to the word condescension and break it apart. So what is condescension? Condescension is an inner state of vulnerability and insecurity that I project onto you. So I need you to remind myself that I need for you to be down there so I can see myself as being up here. And in many ways, you validate that need of mine to feel like I am useful to somebody. See, because don't forget, you go out there and you bring this person, you import this wife, and they come over. Then they start growing. They almost grow to a point of independence. Because when they show up, obviously, you are the alpha, you are the omega. the beginning and the end. You're everything to them, so to speak, by and large. Then they come to a place where they can fend themselves. What happens to your authority? What happens to that dependency? They're not looking up to you for anything anymore. Or, well, they look to collaborate with you, not to take instructions from you because they're not dependent on you. So withholding A, B, C, or D from them doesn't prevent them doing A, B, C, or D if they really wanted to do it. And in many ways, that is debilitating, at least to the man. So they start looking for other ways of having an edge over the woman. See, because as long as that condescension, as long as condescension has not been dealt with, it will show up in different ways, wearing different masks. It will come in different shapes, shades, and guises. So that is something to look out for. So if the problem is one of condescension, I do not feel I'm up to much. And I need someone who can remind me where I am because they are below me, then we will always have that problem until I grow up. Are we on the same page so far?
Absolutely. So again,
Yes.
so is there never a time when somebody is genuinely, I mean, I think this is a wrong question. I'm trying to look at it from a perspective where the person is not necessarily being condescending, but just because the person is feeling hurt. You know,
Thank you. I love the question. The person is feeling hurt. Let's go back to why the person is feeling hurt. See, hurt means I'm under pressure. Is that a fair point?
absolutely.
When you squeeze an orange, what comes out?
Yes.
Orange juice. If you squeeze even harder, what do you get? Still juice and pulp, maybe,
Hmm.
and the seeds. But whatever comes out of that orange will belong to the orange genus. We agree on that, right?
Absolutely.
If you squeeze what you thought was an orange and apple juice comes out, sour apple juice comes out, then all along you had an apple in your hand. You had that sour apple in your hand. It was never really an orange. It may have looked, felt, tasted like an orange, but really it is an apple. You have to put under pressure first for it to show up. You see, because once you start using language like, look at this person that I went and brought. How dare they talk to me this way? Now, why don't you flip it on its head and ask the question, what did you do for them to talk to you the way they did? Because it's communication, it's always two-way traffic. They may have taken it when they didn't think they had a choice, when they felt like, oh well, they owed it to you to be silent. They felt wrongly, like they owed it to you to be silent because they too felt vulnerable and they knew there could be repercussions. So your complaint becomes you've taken this all this while, you've been in with it, you've been in on it, it hasn't been a problem. All these years that I've used and abused you, you've been okay with it. All of a sudden, you're talking back. What has changed? You've become your own person. So, why is it that why is it, help me, Lambert, why is it we never break things down into their component parts, deconstruct, pick them apart to see what is really happening, what is underneath the surface? Sometimes we focus too much on the wave, we don't look at the current that generated that wave. And I think that's where we get it wrong when it comes to relationships that involve two people, because obviously a relationship will always involve two people. And I think that is where things start going south. Because again, a recap, you have these two people. She comes in, she's submissive, she takes it all because she hasn't got a choice. Plus, she needs to find her way around, and she needs you in every way, shape, or form. That's dependency. Slowly, she starts growing. She understands the terrain. She knows her way around. She knows where to get what and how to get it. She moves from a place of dependency to a place of independence. Independence. And that is when she is ripe because now she is the wife you were looking for. Again, I always say this every man wants a strong woman. Not every man can handle a strong woman. A woman who can take initiative, a woman who will be all right whether you were around or not. Now, that frightens some men because it almost feels like they are stepping on the man's authority, that ability to be to be autonomous, that ability to be independent, that ability to take initiative, and at times to take initiative in ways that we would not, or if we took initiative, we would fall short. So they do what we conceive of as our role, and they do it better than we do it, or better than we did it, or could have done it. It takes a big man to be able to live with that. Or they correct us and it turns out they were right in their argument. We feel offended and we feel disrespected. We may not show it at that particular point in time. We wait for the next conversation. And if by some stroke of luck she got it in the slightest bit wrong and we were right, we then lord it over her, run her down well and proper. And in effect, what we're doing is compensating for the last time she got it right to remind her where she belongs. So we can use that to browbeat, to oppress, suppress, subjugate, then we do it. We may not realize we're doing it because by and large, we're meeting a need. And our focus at that time is to meet that need of significance. We do it at their expense. So, what in effect are we dealing with? We're dealing with the conflict that is within, that lies beneath the man and within the man. It has nothing to do with the relationship. That's why that relationship is important in the first place because it helps the man grow. It will bring out all these iniquities, all these ineptitudes, and all these impurities. It brings them to the surface, and then the man can decide whether or not to deal with this, grow, come up higher, get that promotion and elevation to a point where the woman actually respects them. That is earned respect, which is different from demanded respect. You can't do anything with respect that you demand, like demanding an apology. It is an apology in and of itself. It's a sorry situation. You ask for an apology and someone gives you an apology, but what do you do with it? What do you do with that, Lambert? If you make me say, I am sorry to you, and then you turn your back and I go, respect just moved from there to here. But hey, you thought you got what you wanted. So you would notice that if you actually took that expression, yes, I'm okay, I'm sorry, which I give it to you. If you took that expression and you open the container and you look at what was in it, you would beg that I keep it. Because it'd be full of worms and all kinds of all kinds of gore. But because we live in a world which is all about appearances, you want to be seen to be, and nobody cares about what is beneath the surface. We're happy if we hear it. It doesn't matter whether it is meant or not, as long as I get an edge over you. So you realize that this whole thing we talk about, relationship healing, has nothing to do with the relationship. It is personal healing. We use each other to heal so we can actually come together and run a relationship.
That
There's
is deep.
nothing to fix. Yeah, there's nothing to fix in a relationship. They're just two people who need to be fixed so they can relate.
Hmm. So, in preparing for this show, I had to get this, and it's a beautiful quote. When you stop expecting people to be perfect, you can like them for who they are. Because again, I think part of the problem too is just that there are certain expectations, which is what you are alluding to here. There's nothing to fix about a relationship. There are just two people to be fixed. But the danger is always that the one person is always thinking that the other person is the one who needs to be fixed. And generally, um, when you start having that sense that the other person is looking at you as the one that needs the fixing, you get back into your defense mechanism shell. You start looking for things to show that no, you have a wrong conception of who I am. And then you go around in circles. And that is how the whole thing spirals out of control.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing with the remark you just made is that it's not always that obvious. It is something that lurks on the surface. It's something that lurks deep within us, deep in the subconscious. That deep desire to meet a need that we've been starved of comes back to needs again. So we meet these needs in positive and or negative ways. And if we have been groomed to feel like we have to fight for everything, then the tendency will be for us to meet these needs in very negative ways. So you're looking to feel significant, you're looking to be valued and appreciated. What do? You try to control it. You try to control people, places, and situations or circumstances. Now, you and I know that you can't do that. The only thing you can control, in fact, control serves us best when we exercise it on self. The moment we start exercising control on anything outside of self, it becomes a recipe for disaster. When we control the self, the world bends over backwards to work with us to achieve whatever it is we seek. When we try to control the world, it breaks us, or we break in the process. And it is as simple and as complicated as that. And the biggest challenge in all of this is when two people come to the table, to the conversation table, and a dialogue needs to be had. It's like you just said, one person knows that there's one thing they need that they don't get, and that's their focus. The other person is doing the exact same thing. They know what it is they need that the other person is not giving. The only reason they got together in the first place is because they used to get these things. These needs used to be met mutually. So for something you've always had, you appreciate it when you lose it. And then when it is lost, you feel entitled to it. And that's the only thing that is at the back of your mind. It doesn't matter whether you know that that's what you're doing or not. It then comes out subliminally, unconsciously, or subconsciously. And that is why I don't believe in, because if you go out there, you read lots of books, amazing books. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's an amazing book. You've got to read that book. It captures and encapsulates the differences between men and women by and large and all of that, which is great. And a lot of these differences are physiological. They are down to hormones and all, because obviously we've got different hormonal and biochemical makeups. It predisposes us to different moods. Because obviously, by and large, ultimately, our feelings take their rise from our biochemistry, which is layered on our physiology, or upon which our physiology is layered. Same makeup. So we're happy, we are sad, we are excited, we are frustrated, we're pissed. It's all biochemical reactions garnered by synaptic connections, which wire and fire together and then freeze as emotion. And that is what we take away as an experience and as memory. The different things in life trigger these different reflex actions. external representations of whatever it is that's going on within us, or external manifestations of internal presentations. That is who we are. So whatever we display on the outside is a direct function of what is happening within us. The question is, we may have these physiological differences, which is understandable. Are we letting these physiological differences control us, or are we leveraging them to build synergies? Because these are the differences that make us strong. Obviously, the one will be strong in one area based on their physiology, and the other will be strong in another area based on their physiology. Physiologically, the man is usually bigger, stronger than the woman. So you leverage that to protect your woman. Emotionally, the woman is more intuitive. Certain things will come to women a lot more naturally. They may not be as strong, but they usually will be a lot more versatile. We've always associated um, multitasking with women, for instance, because these are things that would come to them naturally. So if that becomes a threat to a man, then we've got a problem. If a man starts competing with his wife or his woman because of her ability to multitask, and he can never really be anything as good, or her intuitive nature, and everyone praises her for being intuitive, and you start feeling bad because you don't get that kind of praise, and you are not privy to that validation since you don't have it. We start competing, and once there's that competition, it is the seed of a problem that has gotten sown. A problem, well, a seed which once grown becomes a recipe for disaster, and it will bear fruit until it is trimmed. And that is a good thing about relationships, because relationships will ensure that they bring these things to the surface. And if you can hide them until you get married, then it still works. So you get by up to a certain point, you have a child, and that child will bring out all the differences that exist between the two of you. And how does this happen? We've touched on so many points and we've gone in so many different areas. And the reason I'm touching on all these different areas is so that we can actually capture the things that are responsible for the differences and the problems, the things that break families. So, you could have a family at loggerheads, you could have a family in conflict, you could have a family fighting in and out, and they think they're fighting about A, B, C, or D, whereas it has absolutely nothing to do with that. So I touched on the kids. The child comes, the child is a product of love, and so the child is going to demand love from both parents. The child is going to insist that both parents collaborate to meet it at its point of need. And if that is not happening because the two people can't get together and engage and relate, then you will see friction in all its different forms show up. Are we there, Lambert?
I am here. I just put up a quote. I want to read it so that I know it's long. Lambert, your quote nails it. The perception that a partner needs fixing is counterproductive and can irretrievably damage a relationship. The more one person believes that his or her partner should be different, the less initiative he or she will take to change things. Most people come in making a case for why the other person needs to improve. Spoiler alert, that never helps. So it's a complex thing. Let's put it that way, because I don't think um, we complement each other in relationships, isn't it? We're supposed to bring out the best from each other based on the mixing, isn't it? When I meet you, remember the dance we talked about, the relationship as a dance, that mutual flow. And so in this, while I agree with Jude to a certain extent, you are thinking about it in terms of the bad things that the other person is seeing in you and wants you to improve. Improvement could also be in terms of the good things that are in you, they want you to be better, isn't it? So again, it's not just we tend to look at it in terms of just the somebody has identified a weakness and wants you to improve on the weakness. And we're saying that man, generally, when I'm using man here in the generic sense, we human beings, we want to focus on the negative. That's where we are, the negative aspects. But there are things in our lives that our spouses bring to the fore that we want to continue to excel in them because, again, thanks to this person, I've been able to see, for example, that, oh, I have a sense of, a good sense of judgment. If I didn't live with this person, I might not have picked that up. So while we want to celebrate those good things, I think it's also good to be able to identify that, okay, the other person is saying that there are certain things in one's life that one cannot change at a certain point, isn't it? How do we deal with it in a relationship so that it doesn't break the other person? And that's why my my assessment of the quote is both and, yes and no, isn't it? And I just explained that yes, you bring out the best, but where you see a weakness, you should not capitalize on the weakness. Celebrate the good things and help the person through because some of those things, it comes with a package. Your analogy, the orange, when you press the orange, you are going to get juice, isn't it? That's what you're going to get from it. And that juice is juice that could be sweet, could be sour, could be anything, could be a mixture of the sweet and sour. Okay. But very often, what I'm trying to put across is most often people focus on the sour part, forgetting that there's some sweetness even in that. Don't doctors tell us not to take a lot of sugar?
That's a point.
Because
So that's a good, yeah, that's a good point. So let's see if we can touch on all points. So there's the quote that Jude um, alluded to,
Mhm.
and obviously you looked at both sides of that coin, and you're making the argument that sometimes, obviously, um, it's important to highlight areas of growth as well. Did I hear you correctly?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. So definitely. What's the point? What's the point having two people come together if they're not going to sharpen each other? It becomes counterproductive. So it's not about whether or not we highlight the areas in another person that they can benefit from. We have a responsibility and an obligation to do that. And as you can see, that invariably and inevitably becomes the source of a problem in many relationships because the moment you touch on someone's sensitive area, they want to piggyback on yours as well. And then it becomes a boxing match. Or what about you? Or what about you? But look at, and then we have a fight, whereas the intention was really to grow. So you notice the sources of differences between couples are not few and far between. It's not a question of whether or not these are raised. They need to be raised. They must be raised because that is how two people deal with their vulnerabilities. Now, that is how two people get past the social construct that we usually put out there. The world calls it an ego. I call it the social construct. It is the thing that represents us out there. That is vulnerable. It protects our vulnerability. Now it's fine if we, it's not fine when we do it out there, but hey, most people do it to survive because the world can be very judgmental. But it is something we need to overcome because if you try to be something or someone you're not out there, the more you practice that, the more you become your ego or that social construct. And the less of you is available to show up even when you come back home. You come home and what you've been practicing is what will eventually come to the fore. And so, even at home, you will be protecting your vulnerability, not realizing you've come home. This is where you're supposed to feel safe, secure, and comfortable. This is where you can just be yourself. This is where you can just go naked and you do it from time to time. So, what is it if your wife or your spouse can see you naked in your natural form as you were born? Why don't you let them see your your iniquities and all your other imperfections? Because I'm sure you would agree with me that when we're all dressed in $600 suits, or some for some people $3,000 suits. We all look pristine. We all look state of the art. We all look like Don Juan. But beneath that vest, beneath what it is we are wearing, we have wrinkles, we have all kinds of imperfections, which the spouse sees. So if we can be comfortable with that, why aren't we comfortable with all the other imperfections? And this is where humility starts. If people can accept themselves at that level and realize that they can be free with one and with each other, I mean, totally free, open, and vulnerable, until they can be that to and for one another, growth will happen at its fullest potential. They will remain at the level of potential and they will never really grow past that level. And whatever it is they manifest will be, they will be living, selling themselves so short. And if only people could understand that, this is why they say your vulnerability is your strength. Because it is in that place of vulnerability that the other person can plug in, connect with you, and then you both engage, exchange energies, and build synergy, which is why two people come together in the first place. So they can become the best that they could ever be with the resources that they are. And then they go out there to change the world. But if you spend your whole time fighting each other, then guess what? You become the problem that we see in the world. Because if the family is broken, there's no way society will survive, given that the family is just, sorry, society is just family engaging and interacting out in the community. So that's the first bit which is dealt with. The second part you talked about something else. Can you remind me, Lambert, please?
Is
Sorry,
it the one of Jude or the
the Jude one is already. We just dealt with this one, where I'm saying it's not whether or not these weaknesses are highlighted. It is how they are highlighted in a way that the other person does not feel denigrated. I'll say that again. It is about how they are highlighted such that the other person does not feel put down. And usually or typically you would realize that those who have some place they are going do not focus or do not major in minor things. They don't focus in the things that are counterproductive and inconsequential. See, because if both of us have decided we're going to a certain destination and we identify something in your character that will slow us down, that will serve as a speed bump while we're on this journey, I'm sure it will be irresponsible of one or both of us to not call that thing out and say, hey, if we're going to get there and get there on time, it's important that we deal with this. And so the question is not, oh, are we going to deal with it? The question is, will be, how are we going to deal with it? It wouldn't be, are we going to talk about it? Or sensitivities will not even come into, they will not even feature because we're going somewhere. You know, they say obstacles are the things that we see when we get our eyes off the goal. That would be your classic example. I know you talked about two other things which I wanted to expand and expound on, but
um
I've lost them.
well, you definitely touched on the thing about the focusing on the good things and not so much on the bad ones. I mean, what you're saying here is not so much about that, but about the how, isn't it? How you address these vulnerabilities, that's very important. Because again, the holier than thou thing is what
It's
is,
counterproductive.
yeah, it's counterproductive. I'm wondering what else did I say? I can't remember.
Okay, that's fine. Let's see if we can improvise. Um, let's see if we can just connect the dots. So again, if we look at this whole thing, I always come back to energy. I always want to come back to moving away from who we think we are and embracing identity as energy or pure light. So you would realize that the only time we find ourselves in a place of conflict is when fear sets in. And again, what
Mhm.
is this? What is this fear all about? We're afraid of losing something, or trying to recover something we think we have lost, which is the exact same thing. So we've talked about fear, about love, which is healing, and we've talked about fear, which is destructive. That is the source of all ailments, all disease, stress, you name it. In this case, when I say fear, what do I mean? Someone who's looking to be respected, what are they afraid of? Afraid of losing their identity. They're afraid of being vulnerable. They're afraid that if they are seen in a certain way, they will be considered of as not being good enough. So you notice there's a lot. There is so much to fear there. Is it your identity you're losing? Is it your title you're losing? Is it your manhood you're losing? Is it the respect that you're losing because your spouse can see your weaknesses? Well, I'm sure she knew you had those weaknesses when she married you. Women usually typically know. They just decide to live with certain things because they know, okay, cool. That's it. Nobody's perfect. So when we start hiding these weaknesses, things that are so obvious, when we start defining ourselves not by our strengths, but by our weaknesses, not by where we're going as a couple, but by what we're not getting in the relationship, that's where things usually will typically start going wrong. And until we start having open conversation, open communication, we will always have problems. Because there's talking and there's communication, and those two things are not always the same thing. Having a conversation and talking, you can talk to someone, you can talk at someone. It doesn't mean you're having a conversation. It doesn't mean you're having a dialogue, because the dialogue is positive. It's all about a feedback mechanism. I speak, you understand, you demonstrate that you've understood, you speak, I validate what you have said, I see how it fits into what I said, and then I build on it and we take it to the next level. But how often do we walk past and talk past each other and not communicate? Because you are talking and your focus is in one direction, you're using words which you interpret going in one direction, and I'm talking, my focus is on some other direction, and I'm understanding the words you're using in a completely different context, relating them to that context, picking up on examples and triggers from my own past where that thing that you're talking about was disrespectful, where it made me feel really bad, really hurt, made me feel uncherished, unappreciated, reminds me of bad experiences I had had. And these are all in my subconscious, and I don't even realize that I'm misunderstanding you because you're using words in your own way. And they're triggering me in ways you will never understand because I never really took the time to tell you my experiences and what they were in that particular department. So there are two things. One, open communication. Two, not making assumptions, regardless of our physiologies, because it is our responsibility to get to understand how the other person works. That is what complementarity is all about. Hand in glove, you look at your right hand and your left hand. One doesn't work for the other doesn't work for the one. They work together in partnership. They are mirror images of each other, which means they look alike, but they are different. And it is that difference that allows them to work together in unison to prepare the food that sustains the body. But if the right hand tries to become the left hand because it prefers the way the left hand looks, then we have a problem. We have something like that. Now, how do these two work? I'm sure you'd agree with me. If you hold your hand like this, you can't peel onions, you can't eat. There's nothing you can do. They
Yeah.
can't collaborate. For them to collaborate, it needs to be that way. Then they come together, they do stuff, they can hold, and that's exactly how relationships work. And our environment pretty much shows us, it gives us the answers to how we should harness and manage our relationships. But our vulnerabilities always get in the way.
So, Vicky, I think we'll continue talking about this journey of healing. and it's a journey to fulfillment, isn't it? Getting fulfilled relationships, fulfilled lives. And again, we are our topic for today was about how men can begin, healing the relationships. And we said it's not about the relationships, it's about the people. The people are the ones who need the fixing. And he's going to take two. He's not going to take one person dictating to the other person, which is what the point you are just making here. And we have talked about it. I mean, using different images, um, communication is going to be key. And I mean, again, in the context in which we're having this conversation, they sound simplistic, isn't it? Because they have particularities, there are things that are so, and they are listening to you and saying, man, you mean that I will go as high as that even possible? How do I begin
Emotions
to
get
have this conversation?
emotions. Yes, yes.
Good.
And this is yes, this is exactly what this will be my response to every man who says that. They just admitted they have zero control over their emotions. When we say that, we admit to the world that we are not as strong as we pretend to be. We can't control ourselves. We can't control our emotions. We can't control what we think. And we can't give up our excesses, and our need to control. I just translated what you said, Lambert.
Yes, and that's perfect because again, I wanted to say, forget about all that we said. The one thing that has been key today is about respect, which is where you have just ended on. It's about respect because for us men, I mean, we say this in generic sense. The issues in our relationships come from the fact that we often feel disrespected. But you have to look at that, what you consider disrespect, and look at it critically to be sure that you are not hiding behind something. You are not you are misinterpreting a certain language. Again, going back to our decoding, what is it you mean by disrespect? What is it? What do you mean when you say somebody has disrespected you? Okay, and how then to look at that again, because it's in the context of a relationship, how we can have that conversation about this aspect, because you mentioned it again. This is something that you have been carrying. You come with it, and all of us come with these baggages. We expect the other person to automatically become a magician and understand that we have this baggage, and so you just need to understand that this is the way it is. No, but again, when it shows up, you are able to tell the person, this is the way I feel when you do this. Okay,
Exactly.
and how can we, what can we do in order to help each other to avoid this or to encourage this? And I think for that healing journey begins when you are able to have these conversations about things of, we don't just presume that people are disrespectful. It's possible that people just they don't care, but for somebody with whom you share a certain form of intimacy, you have to be able to open up so that the other person should be able to understand that these things, okay, how can we let my prayer, my wish is for us men to have more of these conversations. I mean, I know that, like I said, this is very generic, and I'm waiting for Mindset Boulevard to come where you can, that safe space where you can share some of these intimate things so that others will say, hey, this is how I came across this, and this is how, I mean, this is how it damaged me, and this is how I came out of it. But in the remainder of the time, BK, if you have some other things to add to it, yes.
Yeah. So by the way, the website is up now, mindsetboulevard.com. For those who are interested, obviously you already know about the Facebook page. This will grow organically, and yes, in due course, we want to set up a proper community, a community with serious partnership. And when I talk about partnerships, I'm talking about people who are really committed to growth, people who have services to offer. It doesn't matter whether they're offering those services for free, or offering those services for reward, with expecting financial remuneration. The most important thing is that we will be making sure that the people that we are referring are people who are all heart and soul. And having said that, You said something about caring, and I would like to end on that note. You see, care is a very important word in a relationship. Care is what you want to hear two parties articulate at any and at all times. And if you can add well, construct that word or put that word in a sentence and throw an S in, the question becomes, where are you putting the S? Is it he cares, in which case the S is at the end, or he is scared, in which case the S is at the beginning? So where we put the S is what determines how that relationship will go, how it will flow, whether or not it will glow. So it is important that we punctuate the care very carefully when we are adding an S to it, because that is what makes the difference. Care, scale. On that note, I would like to say thanks again, Lambert, for an opportunity to just have a conversation, um, get people to think, and like I always say, exchange energies and build synergy.
So thank you very much, BK. You just gave me the topic for next week, helping men to become caring and not to be scared and not to be scary. So let's talk about care, how to be caring, because again, we presume that people know it and everybody something that, but how can men, because I think it's counterintuitive to say men are caring in a certain context, isn't it? Because it's all about stuff. So let's focus next week on how men developing caring men who do not scare people. But before I go on, there's BK. Jude says BK is spot on. Highlighting the strengths and weaknesses in good faith can be the magic wand to dilute perceived discrepancies. Partners are always turned up with the slightest inkling of patronizingness and control. Men have been the culprits of these weaknesses. Thank you, Jude. And again, we hope that today, again, like I said before, it's all about what you mean by being disrespected. Okay, we are not saying that people don't get disrespected, but what do you mean by that? Are you ascribing something to it that is not it? And all we are saying in this journey where we want to start healing our relationships is we need to show up. How we show up matters. The energy we bring is going to help build the synergy. You see, I've started talking like BK, okay? So, and again, that helps in order to build up good relationships so that we understand, we try to understand each other, we try to build this synergy. And I would like to end by asking us, go check that out, Mindset Boulevard. I hope that's the correct website, BK. Did I miss anything?
No, that's it, mindsetboulevard.com. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And as usual, we are this is our last Monday in April. So we are grateful. We have gone through again another month, building gradually. We missed one or two shows this month, but that's fine. Thank you for being here. Come back next Monday and I'll see you all. Bye now.